Hey everyone. This past Saturday, on the 30th, Will and I drove up from Vermont to Montreal for a 3-round kill team tournament. Normally I can get a few more folks in the car for an event, but our group was also running a 40k tournament in Burlington on the same day, so it was just the two of us this time. I'm going to start recording this AAR here at my desk, but I did end up playing Will in round 2 of the tournament, and it was an interesting game, so we're going to start getting some other folks on the camera on the channel, and film with Will at our local gaming night this week to talk a bit about that game. So, when there's a cut away from my desk, that's why. But this tournament was really exciting for us for a couple reasons. First, any chance to go to a tournament in a different city is exciting. Second, Montreal is the closest city to Burlington, so they're practically our neighbors. And third, I really like the Quebecois. I've spent a lot of time around Quebecois folks and other hobbies. I really like the city of Montreal. It was a good time. It was a really nice drive up. Hour and 45 minutes or so, snowing lightly, right about 30 degrees. Lovely day to kill some teams. My only hesitation about the event was that I don't speak any French. Now, most of Montreal is pretty bilingual, but it's always a concern to show up and be that American. Luckily, almost all the players spoke pretty good English, and everyone was fantastic. Really a wonderful bunch of people that are doing the same sort of work that Adeptus Adequate is trying to do here in Vermont, and building a great community that can also play a tight competitive game. So for the tournament, I was playing Blades of Khaine again. Will was playing Farstalker Kinband. The tournament was 14 players and 3 rounds, with a really good mix of experience levels, ranging from folks that clearly play in tournament settings regularly to folks that were very new to Kill Team as a whole. There was also an interesting mix of factions. There was a Hearthkin Salvagers, Hernkin Jaegers, 2 Farstalker Kinband, Hyrotech Circle, Vespid Player, 2 Phobos, 1 Warp Coven, 1 Angels of Death, 1 Plague Marine, 1 Exaction Squad, 1 Legionaries, and myself on Blades of Khaine. So just under half the field were some type of Astartes. Now, I don't want to bury the lead. I did end up winning the event. I've had a pretty lucky streak of winning tournament games for a while now, so I was fully expecting to run into a brick wall of Ceramite and lose horribly, especially now that I've started actually telling people about what I'm doing. I'm a pretty competitive person. I don't mind losing games, and I try to be process-oriented about getting better at the game. But being one of the loudest cheerleaders for a faction does make me feel a bit of pressure to actually put up some results with them. So it did feel good to come out with a 3-0. Anyways, on to the games. Round 1 was against Exaction Squad on Volcus, and the mission was Transmission. So this was a matchup I was sort of dreading, since the Subductors are a nightmare to deal with in melee, and their offensive profiles are really good into elf bodies. I also hadn't played against Exaction Squad before, since nobody here in Burlington is playing them at the moment. So, brushed up on the rules, and away we went. I was playing a mixed team with a Scorpion Exarch with a Claw, since he one-shots 8 wound bodies on a crit and has lethal 5-up. I chose Overrun as my tack-up, and took all the faction equipment, and took crack grenades and scouting, figuring those would be my best option to pick up a Subductor safely. My opponent took 3 Subductors and his leader with a shield. I forget all of his equipment offhand, but importantly he took a heavy barricade to be able to stage up a little bit more safely, and the Exaction Squad version of Chain Snares. His tack op was Contain. And that of course sets up a kind of interesting dynamic in that he's playing Contain and wants to keep me off his half of the board, and I have to stay alive on his half of the board to score my tack op. So that kind of it kind of skews the matchup in that one of us is going to be successful and the other won't, right? So I gave my opponent the initiative in deployment, and he chose the side of the board with the 3rd story vantage, which was fine by me, as I had places that I could pretty safely stage a Banshee or a Scorpion, then Dance of Death to swap it for a Banshee, and get to that 3rd floor if he tried to make a sniper's nest out of it. We each staged our models, and I chose to pack the stronghold on my side of the board with a bunch of models as close to the door as possible, and a Striking Scorpion a bit forward to initiate trades. My opponent moved up safely. Turn 1 ended with nothing really happening. Turn 2, I won initiative and decided to try and do something interesting. I was, trying to to make some plays I wouldn't normally make this tournament and try some new stuff, especially with Dance of Death. On the right side of the board, from my perspective, he had a Subductor, the Dog, and the Handler, and a Mallocator. But they'd have to be a bit more exposed, since on the other side he could hide everything in the Stronghold. So I decided that I was going to make my push on the right side of the board, use Dance of Death to get a Dire Avenger a little bit forward, threw him right up towards the point, within 2 inches of the Subductor and the Dog, shot them both with Torrent, and then used Starfall and threw a crack grenade at the Subductor. My Shuriken shots did literally nothing, but my crack grenade put the Subductor down to 1 wound. My opponent shifted some resources over to that side of the board, killed my Dire Avenger, and then I went with my second Dire Avenger, got up onto a vantage, and shot at one of his other Subductors on the opposite side of the map with lethal 5-up, and left it on 1 wound. Then I moved some more models, including my Exarch, over on the right side of the board, and double shot with Shuriken pistols, and left his Leashmaster on 1 wound. Leaving 3 models on 1 HP in a row is not really what you want to see, but it happens. But this kind of created a weird dynamic where we had both activated everything on the right side of the board, but neither of us wanted to commit to the center point because we were both staged to kill anything that stepped onto the point. So luckily I was able to start actually killing some models with a Howling Banshee that was able to fight through a doorway, kill the Dog, use the Woe to dash forward, and then failed to kill the 1 wound Leashmaster with shooting. But I did pick it up with a counteract shot, as well as the 1 wound Subductor on the right side of the board. But unfortunately, the way things shook out, I didn't score Overrun on Turning Point 2. Entirely my own fault. I could have, but I got a bit greedy with where I was putting my Overwatch shots, and made a stupid mistake. Turns 3 and 4 were pretty similar to turn 2, in that I continued pushing him aggressively on the right side of the board, and I tried to stall out the center of the board by sacrificing a Howling Banshee and a Scorpion as he threw his leader, and the, I can't remember the name of the model. He kept calling him his Leather Enthusiast, which I thought was hilarious. So his leader and the Leather Enthusiast, tried to move towards the center point. So it turned into a kind of grindy game. By turn 4, I only had 2 models left to my opponent's 3. My Exarch unwounded on the right side of the board, and a Dire Avenger unwounded on the left side of the board. Fortunately, my opponent had some more models than me, but they weren't in a great position to deny me points. He did have a chance to tie the game, though, if things went his way. He won initiative on Turning Point 4 and used Execution Order on my Dire Avenger. So I was up on points, but because he got to go first and had Execution Order, he had 1 shot to kill my Exarch, using the mobile profile off of his sniper, and then he had a shot to kill my Dire Avenger before I got to activate any models. And that was with, shooting from his other models, so not super reliable, but he certainly had a shot at it. Luckily, my Exarch survived, and the Dire Avenger survived, and I was able to stand on points and score it up. So after dropping the sniper with my Exarch and getting overrun, denying contain, we finished the game with 2 models each, score 15-6.
All right, we're good to go.
Right on.
Well, you already know me.
Hey guys, I'm Will. I was Milton's opponent and partner in crime for the event. So I guess we're here to talk about round 2.
Yeah, we thought it'd be interesting, since we're both, good friends and in the same town, to talk a bit about some interesting points of the game, how it played out, because it was very close and could have gone either way up until the last activation or 2.
Yeah, I thought it was a really close match that I thought I was ahead of up until the last turn. Little spoilers. But, so what was the crit op we were playing?
The crit op was...
Cut this out. No kidding.
The crit op was Intel. And we were playing on Volcus.
Yes.
And so I was playing Blades of Khaine, obviously.
I had brought Farstalker Kinband, which is a team I like quite a bit right now in the current meta.
Yeah, so I'm not as familiar with Farstalker. Do you want to talk a little bit about like operative selection and what you're
Sure. So you're on the scale of horde teams. You're a 12 activation, 12 model team, average of 8 wounds with 5 up saves. So you're pretty squishy, but you have some tools to give you quite a bit of survivability if you're willing to play a slightly non-interactive game. Your rogue strategic ploy gives you really good saves and cover. It's basically the double cover saves.
Yeah.
And you have very good melee throughout your team when you activate your cutthroat stratagem to just give all of your guys an additional melee attack.
Okay.
So you're basically a 4 attack, hitting on 3s, 3-4 team, and your specialists will do 5 attacks. It's an interesting team to just sort of play, again, in this non-interactive style where you're playing surveillance as your primary attack op in most games, and just sort of trying to allow your opponent to make mistakes.
Yeah, and we had talked on the drive up about surveillance and kind of both of our general game plans, hoping we wouldn't have to play each other.
Yeah.
And
not a match I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. But even like knowing that he was going to take surveillance going into the game, man, it's hard to play around.
Yeah, I'll say that the Kin Band have some really great game plans on how to attack the game. They are very linear. Once your opponent knows they're going on, the game plan becomes how they're going to interact with that and how they're going to interrupt with that. But if you're really careful with your activations, you can shut people down in a way that people aren't ready for in a lot of cases.
And then the big decision making, I guess, in terms of operatives is what your gunner takes, right?
Mostly, yeah. I mean, you can.
I guess how many dogs you bring.
There is some argument as how many dogs you bring. But yeah, I really like the flamer type gunner. I think in Kill Team, what is very important in games isn't what actually happens in a lot of cases, and more about the threat that you're projecting on the table through your activations. And having this gunner in a fairly safe place in the middle of the board in the middle turns of the game is just really difficult to play around.
Yeah, similar to the game plan with like the Howling Banshees and the just like having a piece that can kill one thing hidden away where it can get places is hard to get to.
Right, or in the more mid-range to horde matchups, a thing that can potentially wipe out large portions of their team with the flamer ability.
Yeah, because it is torrent, right?
It's torrent too, and so I mean it's the fact that you're 6-inch reposition only and 6-inch range on it means it has 12-inch threat projection, but nothing should be within that range if it hasn't activated yet.
Yeah.
Like a elite whatever. So I mean the fact that it's AP2 5 attacks means that you're not going to one-shot a Space Marine, but you're going to injure it really, really bad.
Yeah, and you'll certainly kill an Aspect Warrior.
100%.
Yeah. Then I took the Striking Scorpion Exarch with a Claw, just because it's good into 8-wound models. If it gets a crit, with Amanda Blasters and a crit, it
no
kills
counterplay,
something.
no interaction available.
1 Striking Scorpion Warrior, 2 Dire Avengers, and then 4 Howling Banshees, which is pretty standard. Like for me, I take them into a lot of matchups.
That's what I'm used to you playing a lot.
So as far as the game itself, we talked about a couple of kind of interesting decision moments or places where the game kind of changed drastically. I think the first one is probably on the first turning point.
Yeah, you definitely threw a curveball to start the sequence. Generally, we're used to turn 1s being fairly non-interactive. A lot of positional play. When you and I are playing, we're really trying to get into safe staging areas to really be protected on our approach to be able to project a lot of threat on turn 2. However, you being the crazy man that you are, I had put my Pistolier and another operative inside of one of the strongholds in Volcus that was on my half of the board, and I tucked them into the corners such that they had cover from a lot of angles.
And it kind of on that particular map, it kind of straddles the center line.
Yeah.
So the stronghold is kind of between the two of us.
And you YOLO'd a Banshee through the door so that you could get very deep into the stronghold in order to get a pistol shot onto my Pistolier.
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to do in this tournament was try to play a little bit more aggressively and try some things that I hadn't normally tried for a while. And so one of those was where I'm outnumbered, really utilizing counteract actions. So I, threw a Banshee forward with a technique to ignore vertical distance, just to get into the stronghold, dropped a smoke grenade on its feet, and started blasting.
Deeper than I thought it could get because you didn't have to go through the hatchway. So that extra inch really matters in this case.
Yeah.
And having the smoke grenade down to cover you is just terrifying.
Yeah, and I mean, so you did end up killing that Banshee between the Pistolier and some of his gunners that were up on a...
Yeah, I had snipers in good position. I could see into it.
But I was able to wound the Pistolier, and then other things went on engaged to kill the Banshee, so I was able to shoot at those with Dire Avengers.
Yeah.
And then I was able to throw another Banshee into the smoke after the first one died to keep shooting. It was a weird sequence of play that...
It significantly increased the tempo of the game, though, in a way that my team is not really comfortable with, where we want to play a very careful, non-interactive gameplay method and slowly eke out incremental advantage. And when I thought you were really, really far ahead on the game and the position of the table because of this turn one play. It was just not a thing I was prepared for.
In terms of other big moments in the game, then... were there any other particular things you thought were interesting?
Yeah, so the turn one, I thought put me on the back foot. I won initiative on turn two. I did take trophy in this game. Notably, I did not take my own smoke grenades. In playing against your Aspect Warriors in the past, or your Blades of Khaine, our matchups have devolved into melee scraps a lot.
Yeah.
And I just didn't think that you were going to do a lot of shooting, or I thought I was going to be safe from a lot of shooting, so I chose not to use those. I really loved the trophy in this game where I won initiative on turn two, and I used my generic warrior with a scattergun to yeet itself forward and 1-for-1 with a striking scorpion. And at that point in time, I think I had killed 2 pieces, and
that Banshee on the first turning point, the Scorpion at the very start of turning point too.
And I think I had only traded 2 pieces at this time as well. So I'm really up in material at this point in time to kind of counteract for this position I've lost. So I feel really, really good about the game at this point in time. There were a lot more Dire Avenger shots that I was not able to prepare for or interact with in ways that just things that don't appear relevant on paper, just you being able to get sneaky shots through when I really am trying to not give away shots and to give away lanes on a fairly safe board. Where for turns 2 and 3, we sort of did a move where I pulled away from you into my back corner, and you pushed up into the stronghold that I had vacated because of the Banshee play. And because of that, I created a lot of space between us. And I had primaried my my tac op of surveillance, and I was just locked into this 9-point game plan. And had played a way to deny a lot of primary scoring because neither one of us really had a lot of activations left over to tap points. It was such a bloody game.
And with Intel, all of the crit op scoring is at the end of the game, and who controls those points.
And
so it's a weird situation where if you might lose one of those points in a stronghold, you don't want to tap it. And
I did not know who was going to hold any of the points in the game on turn 4. I truly did not. I didn't feel comfortable at all to commit to that. I was just trying to kill you. As much as possible.
And same here. And I had taken, I think I actually forgot to say this earlier, but I had taken Overrun. And was able to score that pretty consistently, but I think there was a turn where I only got 1 point on it.
There was a turn you got 1 point. I believe you had to move up a striking scorpion to kill with pistol range, and I was able to get into it.
So and that's important because he's pretty much locked into getting the full points on his primary op for surveillance. So anything that I don't max out on my crit op, I've really got to make up somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, It's the game plan that we both sort of talked about, and
Yeah.
we knew we were going to be playing into it. And I really thought it favored me the way the board position was, and the way our teams interact. I think that especially after the early trades, like I was in a very, very good position coming into Turning Point 4. And there was a very important sequence of activations where I unfortunately made a mistake, just a straight mistake. There was a complex situation where I have multiple pieces on a stronghold hatchway on the other stronghold, and you have one injured banshee on the inside.
Inside the door.
Right. So I just thought that I had a little bit more time than I had. I thought my pieces were a little bit safer than they were. So I took an activation in order to activate my tracker to support one of my characters, to give another operative +1 APL.
Yeah.
That way, my thought was on my next activation, that operative can go over a ladder I'd placed and get into the stronghold, be behind the banshee,
Standing on the point.
So that I'm holding it, right? And that's just one turn later into the turning, or one activation later into the turning point, so one less opportunity for you to kill that operative. And unfortunately, the model that I had placed just a little bit carelessly, so that it was not inside of terrain and cover, so that you were able to get a Dire Avenger shot. And that was very, very important, because you came through, killed the operative, and used that to swing a game that I truly think I was winning at that point in time.
I think so. Because if I hadn't killed him there, that Dire Avenger was my only opportunity to score my attack off that turn.
Right, because I was so far away from you, the overrun really wasn't an opportunity. You could charge your Banshee, but it was on 3 wounds, so any
and you had a CP to fight first,
right,
which
one of the very important
out,
firefight ploys. One of the real reasons to play the Farstalker Kinband is this firefight ploy in order to fight first, which just it just prevents all kinds of opportunities for your opponents to get aggressive. And I just thought I was a little bit safer and just made a 2 millimeter mistake, which is an amazing game to play, and just goes to show the level of opponent that you truly are.
Oh, thank you.
No, absolutely. I mean, one of the best tournament games I've played, and something that was played with sportsmanship and intent, so that neither one of us, I thought, had any moments to get salty at all. It was just business as usual. How do I play this game perfectly? And awesome game.
All right, so round 3 was into Plague Marines on ITD, and the mission was Sabotage. Going into the final round of the tournament, there was 4 of us that were undefeated: the Plague Marines, Hierotek Circle, Warp Coven, and myself. All potentially tough matchups, but Will and I talked about it, and my hope was to draw the Plague Marines, since they may be tough, but aren't as threatening as the other 2 undefeated teams, at least for Blades of Khaine. And luckily that's exactly what happened. I took the same team that I'd taken all tournament, with 2 Dire Avengers, a Scorpion Exarch with a Claw, a Scorpion Warrior, and 4 Howling Banshees, and my TAC op was Confirm Kill. My opponent Jean-Pierre left out the Fighter, and took Take and Hold as his TAC op, figuring he could control the hatchways in the center of the board. Now, I know there are a lot of folks that talk about how Blades of Khaine can't cut it into elites, but I think that's the wrong way to approach these matchups. If you can kill 1 Marine, the game can start to snowball, and being able to double shoot with ceaseless crack grenades means that any one of our models has a roughly 78% chance to delete a Marine. If it's a Dire Avenger with Accurate 1, or any model throwing the grenade from a vantage, you're looking at about an 87% chance to kill them, outright. So the way I see it, if we don't engage, if we try to do things like implant or plant beacons, we can probably score well on our TAC op. We can probably max it out. But we're probably going to lose on the crit op and the kill op. If we just plan to actually kill them, and take the TAC op like Confirm Kill that's easiest to score if you're killing Astartes, I feel that that's our best chance to win the game. There is risk involved, and it's honestly probably tougher against Legionnaires and Warp Coven than against the other Marine teams. But that's how I like to approach these matchups, and so far it's worked out very well for me. So this game was kind of a weird one. Because of the 2-inch movement speed difference and the 1-inch penalty to cross hatchways and the accessible hatchways in ITD, Plague Marines are hella slow. And I could get the hatchway open to his home objective on turning point 1, so if he moved out of his deployment zone into that central room, I could threaten shots on him immediately. I deployed pretty aggressively so that I could reach it and threaten my opponent, and I made a pretty big mistake here. I didn't think that his Plague Caster had enough movement to get where he could use Plague Wind to shoot a Howling Banshee that I had left exposed, not without being open to return shots. And I figured if he, took that risk for the 1 Plague Wind, I could rotate my Dire Avengers over, shoot 3 times, 2 of those lethal 5-up, and probably kill him. Unfortunately, the Plague Caster had enough movement where he could move, Plague Wind, and then dash out of line of sight. So, he rolled really well on the attack roll, 3 crits and a hit. I rolled 0 saves, and just lost a Howling Banshee for absolutely no reason other than that I got greedy on my deployment. So, pretty embarrassing start. But from there, my opponent was in a situation where he could move onto his home objective, but couldn't come far enough forward to get a line to attack any of my models because I had moved to the side of the hatchway. He just couldn't come far enough forward to get the line of sight that he needed. And he could use Cloud of Flies to protect his models from my shooting, but could only use it in one place. And he had 2 objectives to try and protect. His home objective on his side of the board, the one towards the center of the map, and then the midfield objective on the right side of the board. So he chose to use Cloud of Flies to protect his warrior model on the midfield objective on the right side of the board. So I cycled all of my models over to that central doorway, moving, shooting, and then dashing, and was able to kill his leader despite it getting healed by the Plague Caster. I had to use one of the crack grenades to do it, but taking him off the board without losing any other models was a pretty great trade. I was also able to kill his Bombardier in turning point 2, who tried to move up towards my home objective. I did take some damage from a Blight Grenade, but tossed him my second crack grenade in return, and then finished him off fighting across a hatchway with a Banshee. So, going into turning point 3, he was down 2 models to my 1, and I was staged to pivot and try to either kill his warrior on the right-hand midfield objective, or to fight the Icon Bearer, Plague Spewer, and Plague Caster on the middle objective. And so, really, depending on where he chose to place his Cloud of Flies, I go the opposite way. Blades of Khaine is fast enough to make that kind of pivot and attack in the other room, and because of the positioning of the doors in this particular map, he didn't have a great way to move models from one room to the other. So he didn't place a Cloud of Flies on the right side of the board. So I walked over to the doorway, started shooting his warrior model, and I left him on 2 wounds entirely from shuriken shooting. In the middle of the board, I popped some shots off, didn't do a whole lot, and then closed the hatchway towards his home objective after stunning his Plague Spewer gunner. So he could move and get that hatchway open, but then he wouldn't be able to shoot with that torrent shot. And if he chose to go with his Plague Caster instead, then I would be able to charge my Exarch into his gunner and fight. So giving him bad choices on how to use his APL, and trying to basically fork him. So, let's see. This was potentially a mistake, though, and I thought for it about a minute before I made the decision to do it. I could have kept that middle door open and just thrown a model up and scored 2 points with confirmed kill. I decided that doing that would leave me open to getting blown out if he could get a really good shot with his gunner. So I think ultimately I made the right choice to win the game, but I did leave some points on the table, and like I said in round 1, that can really matter for tiebreakers if you have multiple undefeated players. But I figured I was playing for first. I had scored fairly high in my previous 2 games. I'd have a decent score here, so just made the right decision to try and win the game, and figured I'd have to feel happy with whatever the end result was. My opponent tried to use some guard actions to keep me from being able to get at him, but I was able to just soak the shots with a Dire Avenger or abuse abuse obscuring from the heavy terrain. So going into Turning Point 4, my opponent had his Plague Caster, his Plague Spewer Gunner in the central room, and the Nearly Dead Warrior on the right side of the board. I was able to charge and kill his warrior with my Striking Scorpion, finishing it off with Amanda Blasters. He healed his gunner, and I moved, opening the central door with my Exarch and fought the gunner. So this is the first fighting that my Exarch had done. I'd done very little fighting at all so far in this match, mostly just running around with shuriken pistols and shooting things that have already activated. And I rolled terribly. I only got 2 hits, and he used Plague of Rust to get rid of one of them. So my Exarch had to use a Rune of Shielding to not die to a retaliating gunner. And so, you know, that's a little bit rough, but he easily finished me off in return, but couldn't really push on to any other objectives at that point, and didn't have a great solution to scoring his tack up because I could just contest it with my APL3 models from the other side of the hatchway. So that was pretty much the game. I was able to get the other points on my crit op, the tack op, and I was able to finish off the gunner, leaving my opponent with just the Plague Caster left at the end of Turning Point 4. So after 3 rounds, I was 3-0, and I got to watch the very end of the game between the Hyrtech Circle and Warp Coven players. The Hyrtech player won, which left us as the 2 undefeated players, and I squeaked by on tiebreakers to get first place, with a difference between our total victory points of 3. So, very close, and while I did come out on top, like I said, I left some points on the table in a couple different games, and it could easily have gone the other way. So, things to work on in the future. But another 3-round event, and another first place finish for Blades of Khaine. My main takeaways from my play at the tournament were, 1, there are more situations where Dance of Death can do interesting things than I initially thought, and I should be looking for the potential to make more plays with it. 2, I still have a tendency to try and do something novel and flashy where there are more straightforward and better plays available, like the Dance of Death play in Game 1 with the Dire Avenger. 3, I need to rebase more of my Dire Avengers, and I think that there's some pretty good arguments for running the Dire Avenger Exarch with the double Shuriken catapults. I think it has a lot of play in certain matchups, and in a lot of situations there isn't actually all that much difference between a Scorpion Warrior's melee and a Scorpion Exarch's melee. If you don't need to push a ton of damage through or finish things in one shot, I think it's probably better to have that Dire Avenger Exarch that can shoot twice without having to use Starfall, so that you can then potentially shoot twice with your other Dire Avenger. Regarding the tournament as a whole, it was a great time, and the Montreal community is amazing. Everybody was friendly, the event was well run, and the store is above a place with really good banh mi, so it's hard to go wrong. If you get a chance to play in Montreal, this was at Card Brawlers, don't pass it up. Even if Will and I lost every game, just getting out and building connections with some of the other groups in our region is really exciting, and we both plan to attend their other events in the future. Some of their folks are already talking about coming down to some of our events, and what more could you ask for, really? So, we're going to cut back to Will with some movie magic, and talk a little bit about upcoming events since he's our local TO.
Did I miss anything coming up in the next couple of months?
No, that's literally everything.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, cool.
Man, you're doing a lot of work.
Everyone is not me. That's all the other Will, but
Yeah. Anyways.
Cool. Hey guys, just to steal the microphone for another moment, talking about events coming up, because I am actually a tournament organizer in the Vermont region. We in Vermont Gaming Academy in the Burlington, Vermont area are having a official store championship on December 14th. I know that's not going to give people a lot of time to get over here, but we got plenty of room if you do want to come. Additionally, there is another tournament organizer, another great gentleman named Will, who is going to be putting on a Kill Team Grand. Is it a GT event at Everwinter? I believe it's a 2-day event, so big hype for that. If anyone can get over to Massachusetts, they should really check that out. That's going to be on January 3rd. February 15th. is going to be another big day here in Burlington. We are hosting the St. Valentine's Day Massacre Kill Team event, which is going to be the first round of a tournament series I am greatly trying to promote for 2025. We're going to call it the Mayor of Kill Team Championship Series. It's going to be a regional championship. Mayor of Killtown. It's going to be roughly in the Vermont, New Hampshire, and Quebec areas. And we're hoping to have a couple, maybe 6 to 8 rounds throughout the year to attract some series points in order to crown a series champion and give out some sick prizes. Talking about this Mayor of Killtown, a second event has also been added to that calendar. That is going to be at Mayhem Gaming Convention on April 12th. That's going to be in western New Hampshire. I can't exactly. Lebanon, New Hampshire. Yeah. Thank you. So, keep posted because I'm really aggressively trying to schedule this out. I'd love to have an 8-round series and kill some teams.
Awesome. Thank you again for coming on.
Thank you. Great to talk.
If you want to hear more about some very adequate kill team in Vermont,
we're super adequate.
Yeah, like and subscribe. Looking forward to seeing you. Bye.